What was your worst airline experience? Engine blew during takeoff if you want to go scariest. Worst passenger was on a 9-hour flight from London. Little kids running up and down the plane. Dad drinking and not doing anything to stop them. Finally, after telling the flight attendant I don't speak English even though he clearly did, the flight attendant decided to play back. She gathers up the kids, brings them near the father and asks, "Do you know this man? Or are you children victims of human trafficking?" Dad immediately snaps up the kids, sits them down, and they're good for the remainder. Best part, I got 15k bonus miles after the attendant told me to make a complaint about the dad. I once did a transatlantic flight in which there were around 150-200 kids that were going back to the US from a Catholic youth reunion with the Pope. They were singing church songs for 9 hours and I wanted to kill myself. The only positive aspect was that I guess we had extra protection from God in case of accident. A baby puked on me 3 times. I was on a 14-hour flight and he puked twice on me mid-flight and the last time in line at customs. Frick that baby and frick that butthole mom that didn't even offer an apology. Frick that baby and frick that butthole mom that didn't even offer an apology. You need to practice being a better father, yo. Baby screaming throughout the night. After waking up I discovered it had passed away sometime during the night. Kind of made me feel guilty for getting mad at them. That escalated quickly. Holy crap. When I was like 6 years old, I had to use the bathroom really bad. I was afraid of asking the guy that was supposed to watch me because I was flying alone to let me go to the bathroom. So I end up pee myself and soaking the seat with pee. So for the next hour I was sitting in pee. I forget the rest, but I feel bad for the poor bastard that had my seat on the next flight. The guy who later had to sit in your seat probably had a worse experience than you did. I was 19 flying with my dad from Baltimore to Arkansas and both of us have pretty near the same routine when we fly. Asleep before takeoff. Woken up by the landing. Well, I was jarred awake mid-flight. I looked around and saw some oxygen masks hanging from the ceiling and went from damn it I woke up early to 19 isn't too bad. People have lived shorter lives. I elbowed my dad to wake him up and he, a much more seasoned traveler than I, went a little pale. The plane was caught in some horrible storm turbulence that was just wreaking havoc on, well, everything on board. The pilot comes on the overhead speakers to say something about the turbulence and it went something like this: "Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know that we'll be experiencing a pretty severe turbulence event," and oh crap, followed by complete silence, and then by a very sudden drop. I hit my head off the window because apparently I was too close trying to see things in the clouds like angels or demons carrying us through the storm or directly into the bowels of heck respectively, and the guy in front of me began to gag. The part that scared me the worst? The flight attendants. They were terrified. When the flight attendants are nervous, that scares me. A pilot yelling "oh crap" is pretty low on my list of things I want to hear. Took my seat and minutes later I see my ex-boyfriend walking down the aisle and took his seat, which was right next to me. We ended things very badly and live over 8 hours away from each other. Never expected to see him ever again after we broke things off. Transatlantic flight last year. About to taxi before taking off and another vehicle on the tarmac caught on fire. Plane starting filling with smoke, but also mostly full of English people, so we all just kind of looked at each other for a while with increasing panic in our eyes. No one was brave enough to mention anything to all the staff who were just carrying on like nothing was happening. Perfect English reaction. I wouldn't like to cause a scene. Any plane ride. I'm 6 feet 4 inches. Jesus Christ, I'm 6 feet 4 inches too and I'm always uncomfortable no matter how I sit. I was on a Royal Jordanian flight about 12 years ago. Over the Indian Ocean we encountered the usual turbulence and the captain told us to fasten our seat belts. The flight started very turbulent, jerking around violently. Then suddenly there was just stillness for a split second. I'll never forget that moment, because what followed was the most terrifying minute of my life. The plane plunged. We just fell like a rock. People were screaming, throwing up, peeing and crying. An air stewardess fell into the empty seat next to me and was clearly shook. I distinctly remember someone asked her if we were going to survive, and her reply was, "I don't know." Eventually the plane leveled off and we ascended again. The cabin crew were amazing. We were never given an explanation of what happened, but I found out later that we hit something called an air pocket. I remember looking at the in-flight screen during the plummet. I could have sworn it read 12,000 feet at one point close to the end. Being stuck on an 8-hour flight with a creeper in the seat next to me. He drank pretty heavily throughout the whole thing and hit on me with increasing aggression. Even suggested sex in the bathroom, but at that point the man sitting in front of me told him off. He went to sleep then and passed out for the remainder of the flight. Same thing happened to my wife. The creeper was me. Got on the plane. It's a mostly empty flight. Score. Women sitting across the aisle from me is clearly waiting for the bathroom. She looks pale. Randomly pulls out a plastic bag, looks at the bathroom door for the 50th and last time, and proceeds to puke into the fricking bag. There was a hole in it. Puke all over the place, smells like bile for the rest of the flight. Also, a child screaming for about 3 hours straight 2 rows ahead of me. A creepy guy hitting on a girl who was clearly freaked out and upset by his advances. And the bumpiest plane ride that didn't end on the side of a mountain that I am aware of. This is not so much my worst as it is a bad flight gone good. I was 12 and flying alone, with a flight attendant escort. Unbeknownst to me, I had a 9-hour layover in Auckland, in Middle Earth for those who don't know. Well, apparently at the time, the whole airport shuts down for several hours during the night, and I had nowhere to go. The flight attendant from the flight took pity on me and took me to a hotel. Since she gets to stay for free, got to sleep on the spare bed, got free breakfast and everything. She even takes me to the connecting flight. Always tried to be kind to flight attendants because of that experience. TL.DR. Got to sleep with a flight attendant. TL.DR. Got to sleep with a flight attendant. This is a very misleading TL.DR. When I thought we were all going to die on takeoff, for whatever reason the plane started shaking like crazy. Really crazy. We couldn't have been 100 feet off the ground and it was turbulence you couldn't even imagine. Wasn't even a windy day. I still have no idea what happened. What's funny is I was flying with my little brother. I've flown 1,000 times. Him, not so much. He was a few rows behind me. I looked back with a terrified look on my face. I can't even begin to describe his. I guess I should have been older brother, everything's going to be okay. Nope. I was freaked out. Him seeing my face probably took his world to a scary halt right then and there. My Bahamas vacation that started on 9/12/01. The flight was supposed to be 7 hours. We reached Atlanta in the designated 7 hours, then proceeded to circle above the airport for a further 4 hours due to bad storms. Then we began to descend and the feeling in the cabin turned to euphoria. We land and the lovely air hostess does the usual welcome to Atlanta. Thank you for flying X Airlines. We have X amount of staff and you just flew with 8 of the best of them. We hope you have a good onward journey. A few minutes later, the seatbelt lights were still on when the captain announced over the intercom, I am sorry to announce that we are actually in South Carolina to refuel. If you all sit tight we should be airborne again in about an hour. A further 5 hours later, I got off the plane in Atlanta. The real kicker here was that I missed my connecting flight by mere minutes despite having had such a tremendous delay. Then I spent 3 hours in a queue to have my flight rescheduled. The airline organized overnight accommodation and gave us food and travel vouchers to get to the hotel. We got to the hotel and it was full. We got to the next hotel and I had the best shower of my entire life. I'm amazed the plane had enough fuel to circle for 4 hours in the first place. I went into the flight seated next to an enormous couple who was all sweaty and who didn't exactly smell great. I got offered to change seats so I accepted. To find that I was seated next to a couple with 2 newborns, twins I'd imagine, who cried the entire 4-hour flight. I came out of the plane more exhausted than when I went in. I love plane rides. On a flight to Toronto, there was this crazy snowstorm and we had to divert to Pittsburgh. This was already a 10-hour flight. Then once we landed in Pittsburgh, we weren't allowed off the plane. So we sat there for another 6 hours before taking off again to go to Toronto. I fell asleep at some point and got woken up when we landed. I stayed with some relatives in Toronto for what ended up to be a short stay, then went back to the airport for my flight home. I was early for the flight, but because of the storm everything was screwed up. There was a line to check in that went from one end of Terminal 1 to the other end and curled back around. When it started to get close to the time of my flight, I told one of the employees that my flight time was nearing, hoping to get bumped up. But there were too many people in the same situation that it didn't happen. So I missed my flight. I called the airline and got put on a later flight, but had to wait until evening for it. Finally got on a plane, got home. They lost my bag. So my family was moving from Texas to Carolina. My dad had already started his job over there, so my mom, brother, sister, and I are flying over. And our dog Gizmo, we are flying southwest. Well, our flight gets delayed, and delayed, and delayed. Apparently a bird flew into the engine, so they ended up cancelling the flight. This was a morning flight, but we are fortunate that we can get on another flight that evening on American. One thing I should mention, my younger brother has a severe peanut allergy. I'm talking he's been in the hospital about 6-7 times from being exposed. Not always ingesting them. A few times we're just being around it. Well, we've flown plenty of times with him, and it's no big deal. Mum of course always called the airlines before to make sure they were serving pretzels not peanuts. She goes on the plane for pre-boarding, wipes everything down in his seat, and there isn't ever a problem. Unfortunately, though Southwest was aware of the issue, American was not. Mum talked to the gate agent, and she said there wouldn't be any issues, just to talk to the stewardess on the plane. We get on, talk to the stewardess, and she has to clear it with the pilot. Okay, so we wait, and wait, and wait. The plane was supposed to take off almost an hour ago, and here we are still at the gate all boarded ready to. Apparently, the pilot didn't feel comfortable flying with my brother on board, so he was ensuring that he could deny us from traveling without getting in trouble. They start the flighty safety demonstration, apologize for the delay, and then another stewardess comes up and escorts us off of the plane. So we get to do this walk of shame like we were the ones who were holding up the flight, which we were, in a sense. The airlines put us in a hotel for the evening and then we got on another flight the next day, Southwest again. So that whole long story sucked, but it leads to this funny shorter story. In the process of all that mess, my sister gave our dog Gizmo the maximum allowed dosage of doggy tranquilizers, prescribed from the vet, to keep him sleeping during the flight. It was essentially 3 doses over 24-36 hours. Right after we get off the plane, Dad picks us up and takes us over to what will be our new house. My parents were closing the following day. We went into the backyard, where there was a pool, and Gizmo, who is a tiny Yorkshire Terrier, makes a beeline to the pool and jumps in. Struggling to swim, Dad fishes him out and puts him into the yard. He turns right around and jumps back in. My dad fished him out again. We lived there for 5 more years with that dog and he never again voluntarily got into that pool. Terrible nut allergy, so luckily they had a row designated for peanut allergy people. He got served sandwiches with walnuts in the sauce. No warning. Allergic reaction on a 8 hours flight equals worst 8 hours of my life mostly spent in the lavatory. Funny story actually. I was coming back into Denver on a connecting flight from Dallas late at night. Before I had departed from Dallas, my friend had told me there would be some heavy winds that might cause a little turbulence. I acknowledged that and then got on my flight and left. Late at night I was tired, so I began sleeping. I had fallen asleep about halfway through the flight, and when I had woken up, we had landed. Alright, cool. But everybody is freaking out, and everyone is quietly talking to one another in a hushed but freaked out tone. Turns out that a little turbulence was a lot more than a little turbulence, and the plane had apparently dropped from the air a significant height, as well as violently turn each and every way coming into Denver, making the landing very difficult for the pilot. And yet somehow I slept through all of it, not once feeling disturbed in the slightest. I always knew I was a heavy sleeper, but wow. Oh yeah, I also checked later and found out my seatbelt wasn't fastened at all. Maybe you had woken up, but had severe memory loss due to hitting your head on the ceiling. I'm watching this while I'm going to Bulgaria from Romania and I love this hashtag feature me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.